Okay. I'd like to call to order this county board meeting on Thursday, August 21st, 6:30 p.m. May I have a roll call, please?
James. Here. Jay.
Here.
Kibler.
Here.
Langenheim. Here. Maxwell. McGuire. Michaels.
Here.
Mitchell. Petrie.
Here.
Quisenberry.
Here.
Richards. Rosales.
Here.
Schrader.
Here.
Schwartz. Alex. Bergson. Carter. Cowart.
Just called your name.
Esri.
Here.
Harper. Hartke.
Here.
Kurtz.
Thank you. Well, we have a quorum. And next, hold on a second. Where's my, oh boy, don't tell me.
5.
Here it is. Please take our seats. Thank you. Gratitude. Cultivate the habits of being grateful for every good thing that comes to you, and to give thanks continuously. And because all things have contributed to your advancement, you should include all things in your gratitude. Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please read the notice of the meeting.
Notice is hereby given that a regular meeting of the County Board, Champaign County, Illinois, will convene on August 21st, 2014 at 6:30 p.m. in the Lyle Shields Meeting Room, Brookins Administrative Center, 1776 East Washington Street, Urbana, Illinois, in said county for the purpose of allowing and ordering payments of claims against the county, receiving and acting upon reports of committees and such other matters as may be brought before said meeting, which said meeting shall continue in session from day to day until the completion of said business.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you, Aaron. Okay, you're way ahead of me. Stand second. Thank you. All in favor of approval of the notice? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I'd like a motion for approval of the agenda and addenda, please.
First.
Mr. Rosales. Thank you.
Second.
Second by Jeff. Thanks. Any changes to or discussion on the addendum? None. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Our first order of business today is, what? I thought we were going to go to the consent agenda. That's what I'm doing.
Okay, on the agenda.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes. No, I'm going to the thing. Yeah. Our first order of business is the addendum, which is the consent agenda. And I'd like a motion to approve. So moved. It's moved. John and Chris. Thank you. Stan James. What's that? Stan James. Stan James. Thank you, Chris. Okay. Any discussion on the consent agenda? All in favor? Aye. I'm sorry, roll call. Of course, it's the consent agenda. We do it once a month. Roll call, please.
James.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Kibler.
Yes.
Langenheim. Michaels. Petrie.
Yes.
Quisenberry.
Yes.
Richards.
Yes.
Rosales.
Yes.
Schrader.
Yes.
Schwartz. Alex. Cowart. Esri.
Yes.
Hartke.
Yes.
Kurtz.
Yes. Motion approved. Thank you. Let's move on. Number 6, the date and time of next regular meetings. On this page, county facilities, environment, land use, highway and transportation, and committee of the whole on Tuesday, September 9th, and county board meeting Thursday, September 18th, and public hearing, special finance on Tuesday the 23rd and September 30th. Next is public participation. Just to remind you, each of you have 5 minutes, and we'll go for 1 hour if necessary. Thank you. First up, Belden Fields, please.
Are now? Okay, thanks. I'm here to talk to you, especially in the light of what has been going on in Ferguson, Missouri. I was in St. Louis Monday night when that started. And I was horrified as I watched on television the news and saw the kind of military equipment that had been directed against the people who were protesting. This is something in which I've had a long interest. There's a chapter in a book I wrote called Perpetual War and Human Rights, in which I talk about the effect of militarization in the United States, the constant engagement in warfare since the Second World War, not only in the better known ones, but in Grenada and Dominican Republic and others that are less well known, and the effect that this was having on the American psyche and American policing. And I think it was very important that the trope of war, the kind of analogy, the use of war, war on crime, war on drugs, fed into this impulse. So progressively what we saw was a militarization of policing, and veterans who had been involved in these conflicts coming into police forces. Of course, they had veterans preference, coming into police force, and that instead of any kind of community policing, particularly in minority neighborhoods, what we were getting, justified by the high crime rate and the drugs, what we were getting was a sort of engagement in which the community was viewed as the enemy, and an enemy that was violent. They were viewed as violent, and you had to take super measures to deal with that. I was very dismayed when Champaign bought their first armored personnel carrier. I'm extremely dismayed that the sheriff has purchased one, and I certainly hope he'll either give it back or better yet, sell it for scrap. There's a lot of metal, a lot of iron in that. Could bring a lot of money for the county. There's no other liberal democracy that polices the way we do. You can look at a number of countries which have had serious terrorism in their boards, political assassination, France, the UK, Norway, Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, and they don't police in this manner. And I think that there is a kind of we-them mentality that is developed, which requires overwhelming force in order to subject people to the discipline of law. I think that's extremely regrettable. When I was in graduate school, I had a very famous professor by the name of Harold Lastwell, and he was warning back then in the 1960s, the United States is going toward what he called a garrison state. I think we're there, and I hope we get rid of the armored personnel carrier, the drone, and start policing communities in respectful ways and not looking at our minority communities in particular as enemy territory that has to be subjected. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Brian Dolinar?
Good evening. My name is Brian Doliner. I live at 303 West Locust in Urbana, and I'm here also to address growing police militarization across the country, and in particular here in Champaign County in the wake of Ferguson, Missouri, and the kind of scenes we've seen there. And a reminder that this could happen here. We've had police shootings of black youth, most recently in 2009 with the killing of Kewan Carrington. And I'm particularly horrified by, most recently, the acquisition of this MRAP truck. This is a mine-resistant, armor-protected, 50,000-pound truck acquired by the Sheriff's Office. It was not purchased. It was given by the Department of Defense as part of a 1033 program, which has as its motto, from war fighter to crime fighter. I acquired a couple hundred documents through a Freedom of Information Act request. This is a truck that's arrived straight from Iraq and Afghanistan and is now rolling down or soon to be rolling down the streets of Champaign County. The sheriff claims that he needs to replace a 1986 Brinks armored car, although I would argue that this is used very infrequently, perhaps not infrequently enough, but there's a claim that it was for free, and it's going to replace this outdated truck. But this has cost at least $10,000 out of the sheriff's budget for transportation, which has run around $5,000, as well as a paint job, which is running at $5,000. It's claimed that this is going to be used for hostage situations, for active shooters, to help people get out of snow. But this is, we know, primarily going to be used to wage the war on drugs here in Champaign County. I've FOIA'd in 2007, I FOIA'd cases for SWAT trucks, SWAT raids rather, and it should be noted that the sheriff has not one but two trucks that are used in SWAT raids, one which is a large armored car, the other one which is primarily a personnel carrier. This is in addition to the truck that's also owned by the Champaign Police Department. So we have three trucks in here in our area to already wage these kind of assaults on homes. We know that 90%, I found through study, 90% of drug raids are waged on African American homes. 90% of them are for drugs. 90% of them are done with informant information. We know that the sheriff already has a drone bringing shame upon Champaign County. State regulation was passed when it was exposed. We know that through the 1033 program that Champaign County, this is reported in the New York Times, that we also have some 100 assault rifles that have been supplied to the Champaign County area. This is at a New York Times map of the country that can be found online. According to Brian Meninga of the Sheriff's Department, this is still several months before the truck will be ready to hit the streets. What can we do here in CU and in Champaign-Urbana? I would suggest giving the truck back to the Department of Defense. Berkeley did this in 2012 on the West Coast. In Saginaw, Michigan, this was recently done. They gave the truck back after it was exposed on the John Oliver show last week. We could return the MRAP, or we could simply ask for more detailed accounting. I looked at the sheriff's budget. There's no indication of what the SWAT team receives. Does anybody know what the SWAT team receives annually in its budget?
There's no question and answer here, sir. It's just-
$20,000 is what it receives annually. I would suggest that in the budget you have more detailed accounting of purchases, and we should have knowledge of what kind of military equipment that is being used in our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Charlotte Green, please.
Good evening. My name is Charlotte Green, and I live at 606 North Willis, Champaign. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. Before I retired in November 2013, I worked as a family support worker at Community Elements for 8 years. With a background in working with children and families, I come to you this evening to talk about a topic I feel is of great importance and is often overlooked in our discussions about the jail. I want to consider the impact of incarceration on children who have parents in jail. Then I would like to suggest 2 ideas which we could incorporate to lessen the negative impact on children. Young children are especially vulnerable when separated from a parent who has been incarcerated. Research has clearly established the importance of a child having a secure attachment to a parent or primary caregiver. This secure attachment begins at birth when the parent comforts her crying baby, touches her child in a gentle way, looks at her child in the eyes, smiles, and plays with her child. Secure attachment is the key to a child learning to trust other adults and to be able to form healthy relationships. What happens to a young child when her parent is incarcerated? Her life suddenly changes. She may be removed from her parent and go live with relatives or placed in foster care. A young child may not understand the reason for the separation, but instead feel that her parent abandoned her. Typically, older children experience a parent's incarceration differently. An older child experiences stigma and shame when his parent is put in jail. Often, older children become depressed, emotionally withdrawn, or aggressive. Children of incarcerated parents are 7 times more likely to become incarcerated themselves if there is no intervention. Children are punished when their parents go to jail. Children carry a terrible burden, feeling abandoned by the most important people in their lives, embarrassed and ashamed. As we make plans for our criminal justice system, I believe it is only right that we consider the plight of the children and how we might lessen the negative impact of a parent's incarceration on them. First, I suggest that we look for alternatives to jail time for people who have committed nonviolent offenses so that parents can continue providing care at home for their children. Alternatives to incarceration might include mental health treatment, spending the day in a substance abuse program, or electronic monitoring. Keeping the parent-child relationship intact may help break the cycle of children following their parents' patterns of criminal activities. Of course, there are always going to be cases when jail time is the appropriate consequence for a parent's criminal behavior. In cases when people are a threat to the safety of the community or they are unlikely to show up for court, then they do need to serve time in jail. In these cases, how can we help children maintain a healthy bond with their parents? I am a strong advocate of full contact parent-child visits in jails and prisons. Although video visits are fine, they do not take the place of a visit in which the parent can physically hold or hug their child, read a story, play a game, have a face-to-face conversation, or help a child with homework. These visits need to take place in a family-friendly environment, and they need to be long enough so that parents and children can relax and enjoy each other. These types of visits can reassure children that their parents do indeed care about them, in spite of the fact that the parents are in jail. Currently, full contact parent-child visits are not available in the county jail. It is my hope that these visits will be implemented at the current jail facility in the near future, and that plans for parent-child visits in a family-friendly environment will be included in the master facilities plan. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Good timing, right on the button.
All right.
Mark Enslin?
Thank you. My name is Mark Enslin, and I would like to dedicate my remarks today to those voices on the county board who call for, let's do something. We can talk for a while, but we've got to take some action. And I'm speaking specifically to the various issues around the master plan for the jail and the criminal justice system in the county. A couple of years ago, one of my housemates was a social work graduate student, doctoral student at the university, and she told me that one of the frustrations of being a researcher in social work is that they investigate really important questions that could be of great use to people who are forming and implementing policy, and unfortunately, they seldom are used. And so they make these papers, they publish the papers, and they wish that elected officials and other government officials would take their research and make use of it. And on the other side, people who've been elected or tasked to get things done often find that the resources for getting information, finding out, being able to ask questions and have answers to those questions can be limited just by the amount of time that people have and the resources. And this leads me to one aspect and recommendation that was in the Institute for Law and Policy Planning report, in which there are several places in which they talk about racial disparity in the criminal justice system here. I've spoken about it before you all. It is a large-scale and perhaps intractable problem, and yet in that report there are specifics that they mention where this could be addressed, and one of them is invest in local research on racial disparities in the justice system through working with the University of Illinois, a methods expert, community leaders, respected minority community leaders, and 2 to 3 neutral interested parties. Very specific recommendation. It's given a priority of B out of 3 priorities, and in the 4 phases, it was second. That report takes pains to try to differentiate between racial intent and racial disparity effect. There are various ways of defining racism, and I think this kind of research would be able to tease out and see where a policy maybe wasn't intended to have racially disparate effects, but does nonetheless, where subjective criteria are being used when objective ones might correct a blind spot, which crop up quite frequently. And another document full of great recommendations that you have is the one from the Racial Justice Task Force, in which they recommend that there actually be the Criminal Justice Task Force, they recommend that there be a Racial Justice Task Force. And that is really the key words that I would like to recommend to you to take up. When policies are spread over several years, sometimes it's just a matter of forgetting, and to be able to have an assignment of some body who's supposed to actually implement the things that you might be allocating money for or consider a good idea, I consider crucial. In my own work, I will be asking, oh, so we think this is a good idea. Who's actually going to do it? Can we write that down? And you all can make task forces, and I suggest either taking the recommendation of the Criminal Justice Task Force to create a Racial Justice Task Force, and they spell out some criteria for how to create such a thing, or actually retask the Criminal Justice Task Force itself to keep meeting and keep working on how to implement the recommendations of their own report and of the ILPP report. There just needs to be follow-up. And this task force could then review, perhaps seek out the university's researchers to help with answering some questions and see which of these specific recommendations, of which there are many in the ILPP report, could, in a timely manner, happen even as
Sir,
the master plan
thank
is
you.
going.
Time's
Thank you,
up.
I'm done.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Stuart Levy?
Hello, Stuart Levy of 1108 Foley in Champaign. Thanks for your attention. I just wanted to speak, as others have spoken better before me, to the militarization of police, but I wanted to add a couple of things. Let's see. I'm quite concerned at the acquisition of, well, what looks to be a tank, this mine-resistant vehicle that the county has recently picked up as part of a federal program that, as a lot of federal programs do, by offering things inexpensively, they shape what communities use for them, whether that's good for those communities or not. And I think we should think about these things that are offered as part of the war on drugs and now as military surplus in terms of not whether they're cheap to acquire, but whether they're good for our community. I'm saying this both to you on the county board and also to you, Sheriff Walsh. One thing that you might keep in mind just in terms of the budget and looking at it next week is what will it cost to have to bring in exotic hardware. As Brian mentioned, the sheriff of Saginaw, Michigan, is returning a vehicle that he acquired, another MRAP, 19-ton MRAP vehicle that he acquired just this year, because the maintenance costs were going to be substantial. The spare parts were free, but the labor was not. It was an unfamiliar thing, so it required people with specialized training. It was going to be a fuel hog. Anyhow, he is deciding to return it, and I hope you will too. I also wanted to speak to the picture that the community sees when the police and the county acquire military surplus exotic gear. I mean, think of it both from the police's point of view and from the communities. When police are trained with military equipment, with maybe SWAT gear, if they're trained and equipped with those things, then if the tool you have is a hammer, then problems will look like nails. And that sort of equipment, it was meant for military use against foreign enemies. It's out of place when the considerations that police should be using are protection of public safety and protection of constitutional rights. That's not something that we are concerned about when people are fighting abroad, and it's something that should be foremost when we look at how police operate here. I guess I will stop with that. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Bobby Trist?
Good evening. My name is Bobby Trist. I live at 503 North Fair in Champaign, and I've come before you several times speaking about mental health and jails. And this week, I got some backup from National Public Radio, which had a report on Tuesday and Wednesday about the San Antonio solution in Texas, and that they got that from Kaiser Health News, which is a nonprofit news service. So in many cities across the United States, the mentally ill have no safety net, and this is a fact I didn't know. 10 times as many people with serious mental illness are in jail as are in state hospitals. That, of course, is largely due to the fact that state hospitals were closed in the 1960s, and the conclusion of that process to open community mental health centers facilities has rarely been realized. But one place where it has been realized now is in Bexar County and San Antonio, Texas. The state of Texas ranks 49th out of 50 in how much funding it commits to mental health, but Bexar County has become a model for the nation. 8 years ago, the state of Texas was going to levy fines because the jails were so overcrowded. Today, they're under capacity, And the police department there has a system for keeping the mentally ill out of jail and prison, and it has saved the city and the county $50 million over 5 years. Bear County has a population of 1.8 million inhabitants, according to the U.S. Census 2013 estimate, while Champaign County has about 205,000. At 1/9 of their population, that could save us over $1 million a year, proportionally. Not bad. So the way this happened is a man named Leon Evans came to Texas in 1972 to help set up some of the first community mental health systems. And 14 years ago, he came to Bear County. And the jails were packed with people in various states of psychosis, which is pretty much status quo across the country. About 1 in 5 inmates has a serious mental illness. His plan was simple. Treatment works, jail doesn't. Mentally ill don't make good prisoners. They're often listening to voices, so it's hard for them to obey the rules. Their behaviors agitate others, and jail becomes an expensive revolving door. Many end up on the street when they're released, sick or addicted. They come back in jail for some nuisance crime like sleeping on someone's porch. And when they're in that state, it can spiral downhill pretty fast. So to make a long story short, when Mr. Evans had somebody crunch the numbers and he got all the stakeholders together, they realized they were spending an inordinate amount of money to take care of the mentally ill, but badly. So when they saw the numbers, they shifted their gears and pooled their resources to build one centralized complex next to the city's new homeless shelter. I lived in this community maybe 25 years before I saw the common sense solution of the transportation center. What an improvement that has been. We can do the same thing for the mentally ill. We have the expertise here, and there are scattered resources that could be pooled. We just need the political will. And the police officers there take a 40-hour crisis intervention course to learn how to handle mental health crises so that they do not escalate but diffuse the situation. And the gentleman the police officers who are in plain clothes who were interviewed for this said, yeah, at first they were skeptical, but they've really seen how it works, how much money it saves, and how much wear and tear it saves on the whole system, and that it really works. And in this particular case, they were able to get this gentleman to go with them and be admitted into what they're calling the Restoration Center. It has a 16-bed psychiatric unit, it has a sobering center, and it has a clinic. So there's a lot more detail in this report, which I summarized from the 2 days of reports on NPR. And I have a
Thank you,
reference.
Ms. Trist.
You
Time
can
is
look
up.
it up
Thank you.
online. The reference is there.
Thank you. Tyler Roche?
Good evening. My name is Tyler Rachi. I work as a water policy specialist with Prairie Rivers Network. Prairie Rivers Network is a nonprofit organization that strives to protect clean water and healthy rivers with and on behalf of Illinois citizens. I'd like to comment on the proposed LRMP work plan items for the county planning contract for fiscal year 2015. Work plan items 15-22 sets forth the objective of amending Champaign County's zoning ordinance to include provisions of policy 8.3.1, which allows for, quote, the expansion or establishment of underground mineral or energy resource extraction operations only if, A, the operation poses no significant adverse impact to existing land uses, B, the operation creates no significant adverse impact to surface water quality or other natural resources, and C, provisions are made to fully reclaim the site for beneficial use. This is a positive step in the larger goal to conserve and enhance the county's landscape and natural resources and enable their sustainable use, which is listed as Goal 8. Other objectives under the goal identify the need to, quote, ensure adequate and safe supplies of groundwater. As such, it seems that it would be prudent to ensure that the amended provisions include the protection of subsurface waters as well as surface waters. With the extraction of coal, for example, the impacts to subsurface water are substantial. A typical underground coal mine may require more than 500,000 gallons of water a day to meet underground mining and coal processing needs, straining the source and limiting the use for traditional users. Underground mining can also damage shallow aquifers that rural residents rely on for drinking water. Mining can lead to the fracturing of bedrock, which has led to the dewatering of streams, aquifers, and reservoirs. Once the coal is mined, it's typically processed on-site to separate the coal from the surrounding rock. This is a water-intensive process which generates massive quantities of coarse refuse and coal slurry that contain elevated levels of harmful pollution, including salts and metals like sulfates, chlorides, iron, mercury, arsenic, and selenium. Companies will then dispose of hundreds of millions of gallons of this slurry behind a coal slurry dam, which will remain on-site permanently. Most coal slurry pits in Illinois lack protective liners, allowing the pollutants to enter water systems, which place people, livestock, fish, and wildlife at risk. The businesses and communities of Champaign County are sustained by abundant and high-quality surface as well as subsurface waters. It's in our best interest that these treasured resources are protected from significant adverse impacts that I listed above. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Nilüfer Shambiati.
Good evening, and thanks again for this opportunity. My name is Nilüfer Shambiati. I live at 2609 Cherry Hills Drive. And once again, I would like to talk about the importance of building programs rather than going along with the new proposal from the sheriff's office. So I just want to do a reminder. I think it was on November 21, 2013, that most of you approved the budget for 2014, which set aside some funds for pretrial services and none for the construction of a jail. And most people like me are very grateful for that to you, and you still are. One step that was taken actually, which is very positive, was the hiring of an investigator for the Public Defender's Office. And seeing that, I was really looking forward to see how other programs would be funded and then created that would keep the nonviolent offenders out of jail and directed towards community services that they may actually need. And I also was really disheartened to learn that the same board members who had voted down the construction of a jail had approved a $300,000, if I'm not mistaken, study to basically make additions to the satellite jails, and it is being presented as a way to modernize the entire incarceration system and to quote-unquote humanize incarceration, which of course you all know that it's not possible. Last time that I spoke in front of this board, I made comments on the financial burden and waste of such a proposal and the cost effectiveness of alternative to incarceration. We all know that. This evening, I'd like to point to negative and discouraging trends in the decisions our criminal justice system officials have been making. An example is found in a report dated November 5, 2013, that Judge DeFanis had sent to the county board, telling you all that a 5-week-long study on the efficacy of pretrial services had shown that no tangible benefit can be derived from them, and they would be wasteful of our resources. Moreover, the judge assured the board that those who were involved in this process had, quote unquote, devoted considerable time and resources on this test. I wasn't convinced. especially since what I'm going to say next, which is that it seems to me that it is very obvious that this assessment was done, this test was done and designed so that it would fail. And what ILPP suggests is a 2-year trial period. And they assigned 2 full-time probation officers to this task, and those people were doing, attending to these tasks by working overtime and not having any prior trainings in doing these kind of risk assessments. So that's why I come to the conclusion that this wasn't done in a kind of a good faith basis. And they also have been saying that they are already doing great job keeping offenders out of jail. But the board members and the public really need to know what criteria are being used to make such decisions. We should, of course, recognize that any decision-making process needs to have a built-in flexibility, but it still needs to be done according to a set of rules. What if the future officials don't like what the state attorney's office does and throws everyone in jail instead? I have another example that is even more outrageous, but my time would be up.
The time is up.
Is it up?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at public participation? Sure. You'd like to speak? Please, come on up, and when you're finished, just fill out a form and drop it off. Thank you. Please give us your name when you reach the podium. Thank you.
My name is Karen Medina. I want to continue some of the things that Stuart didn't get around to, and then also talk about mental illness. He also wanted to mention that in Ferguson, the police that were actually trained militarily saw the vehicles that were coming toward them as enemies because they that was their first instinct is, the enemy is coming toward them. And so they treated them that way. And so when you have the equipment and the training to be a military, then your police turn into a military. So I do request that the sheriff get rid of the tank, and it's a silly toy, and it should not be used in my community. I also want to talk about the mental illness that was also brought up. I work in a public place where a lot of people come in, and a lot of people that are homeless come in, and the numbers are increasing. Mental illness is not always the cause of homelessness, but homelessness leads to poor nutrition and mental illness. A lot of people are abused by other people on the streets. In the last 2 days that I have worked, a young man came in and said that he was being beaten by someone while he was trying to sleep by a belt buckle, hitting him with a belt, hitting him with the buckle side of the belt. He's being physically abused, mentally abused, and there's no place for him to go. The places where he has gone, he's been turned away from, or he has troubles with a person that is there. And so there are lots of reasons why they cannot stay in some of the shelters. The woman that came in the next day, she had some mental illness, and that's what drove her to homelessness. She had some mercury poisoning that caused her mental illness. And she's recovering from it, but now she's homeless. And in the last week, she's been homeless for about 6 months. And in the last week, she was sexually abused. We don't need a prison for these people. These people, both of these people, will end up in jail at some point because they come in asking for free food, and when they don't get the free food, they will eventually have to steal it in order to get it. So eventually they will end up in the criminal justice system. They didn't start off being bad people. They started off being very good people. I knew them. I've known them for a long time, and I've seen them go downhill. So if we can deal with homelessness and we can deal with mental illness outside of the criminal justice system, we save a lot of money. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishes to participate? Thank you. I'm going to close public participation. We'll move on to communications. Is there any communications from the board? All right, I have a couple of things. One, Ms. Berkson, Mr. Harper, and Mr. Maxwell have all asked to be excused from tonight's meeting. They called me. Each has other commitments tonight. Last week, on Friday, I was invited to a luncheon with the Attorney General, Lisa Madigan. Prior to that meeting, I sat down over the phone and via email with the Muhammad Aquifer Coalition for the Clinton landfill, Steve Carter, and others. And I was asked to pen a letter to Ms. Madigan. Now, this is the letter I handed to her at that luncheon Friday. Dear Ms. Madigan, thank you for your early support and excellent work by your staff in the protection of the Muhammad Aquifer for affected residents in Illinois. We hope to build a strong case for the siting hearing by DeWitt County Board. However, I want to express my concern that the DeWitt County Board should not be empowered to make the decision for 800,000 people and our sole source of water. Illinois should do what several other states have done and ban landfills from sole source aquifers, or require the siting process for landfills to include all impacted jurisdictions. I am hopeful that your staff can research other ways to protect the Muhammad Aquifer so we can present legislation that will provide definitive protection from dumping toxic waste and PCBs. Our Muhammad Aquifer Coalition attorneys would be happy to coordinate with your staff in drafting such legislation. Sincerely, Al Kurtz. Is there any other communications from the board? Deb?
The mic isn't there. The materials for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday legislative budget hearings next week are at your desk in the notebooks. The agendas for those meetings are inside the appropriate notebook. Please make sure and bring the notebooks with you for those budget hearings. And there are some issues with page numbers. I can confirm to you that all budgets are in your notebooks. If you see missing page numbers, it's just an issue with us getting all of this printed in for you for tonight's meeting, but it's all there.
Thank you. Any other communications? All right, let's move on. I'd like a motion for the approval of minutes of July 24th, 2014. Max, second by Ralph. Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I'd like, at this point, to invite up to the podium Mr. Jim Roberts from the CUPHD for a report on the restaurant placket program. Is the PowerPoint working? Okay, thank you. Each of you have as I'm sure each of you has the report in front of you as well, if you wish to follow. There it goes. You want to go, all right. Jim, turn on your microphone, and at this point, we'll just follow with the pamphlet. Thank you, Chris.
I had a request from Al to look at voluntary posting in the county, and this is just for the county, outside the district jurisdiction, after 6 months of voluntary posting. So this presentation was presented to the district board on the 11th of August, and then the Champaign County Health Board earlier this week. Just a little background, in Champaign County, as of June 30th, you have 319 establishments, and according to the local health protection grant under the Food Protection Program, we're required to categorize these facilities as Category 1, 2, or 3, and that is based on inherent risk. A Category 1 facility would be, I'm from Muhammad, so I'm going to use an example, Los Serapes, where they do extensive food handling, including cooling of food. A Category 2 facility would be like a McDonald's restaurant, where you take something, cook it, and serve it. And a Category 3 facility would be like Dollar General. And we have variable frequency of inspections that we're required to do based on those categories. Anyway, in the first 6 months, we did 181 routine inspections, and these are routine first inspections. Already by June, we're starting to do some second inspections of those Category 1 facilities. And so out of the 181 first routine inspections, I took out the 12 Schwann's trucks because they're kind of hard to follow. And then also, there was one facility, a concession stand, that we could not verify whether they were posting or not. And so this is based on 170 first routine inspections. And the slide number 3, which would be on the second page, shows the inspections within those different risk categories. And then also, too, we are not required to, but this is loosely defined categories of restaurant, food establishment types. Something that we may be easy to talk about, it would be dining services, which would be a sit-down dining service. Fast foods included the concession stands. Schools are either production kitchens or satellite kitchens, and so we just lumped the schools together. Daycare centers, nursing home included long-term care as well as the piecemeal feeding sites. And then retail food stores, and that is both convenience stores or a full-serve grocery store. And then other was just a mixture of taverns, commissary, caterers, lodging facilities. And anyway, those are the number of inspections within those establishment types. Slide number 4, it's the first colored slide. It shows posting and not posting, and you can see it's just about split down the middle, 51% and 49%. And then on the page 3, or it would be slide number 5, again, those risk categories, if we were looking at Category 1, 2, and 3, you can see they're about the same. If we looked at the percentage of establishments posting in those establishment types, you can see, again, the percentage of establishments
Hold on a second,
and their
Jim.
posting
Ralph,
percentages.
you have a question? Well, we're just working off of this, Ralph, right now, okay? It's on your desk.
Page 3, slide 6. Oh, okay. I'm more efficient, I guess, on the printing. All right. And another way of looking at the facilities was how were they performing? And so we looked at performance as measured by 4 different performance measures. First, the total number of violations. Second was, of those violations, the total number of risk factor or public health intervention violations, and those are the violations that are highlighted on the placards themselves. And then a third performance measure was the total number of repeat violations, and that because we do use a scoring system, also how did they perform with what's called the inspection rating score, which is based on the FDA rating score in 1976, and then locally we use an adjusted score. The bottom line is that establishments that posted their inspection notices voluntarily performed significantly better on all outcomes. Okay. Specifically, they had fewer total number of violations, they had fewer total number of risk factor violations and intervention violations, fewer number of repeat violations, and they had higher scores. And all these comparisons were statistically significant at less than p equals 0.01. And we had a intern who has a statistical base, and she created this chart for us. And you can look at the p-values in the last row, highly significant. Usually in science, they look at p-values of 0.05 or less, and this is an order of magnitude even. The numbers are a little heavy, and so what we did is we took looking at performance and used box and whisker plots. And the box and whisker plot, which would be what, number 10 on yours? Right. It shows all the information. So the range on posting, for example, the total number of violations for different establishments range between 0 and 27. And then the first 25% of all those inspections occurred are in between 0 and 3. The other 25% is between 27 and 10, but then in the box itself is 50% of the inspections that were done, and the number 6 is the median. And so half of the inspections were above that, and half of the inspection values were below that. And so it's like when you sell homes, they always talk about median price of a home. It's the same idea, because it removes having some of these extreme things that take place when you create an average. So we looked at median. And you can see, again, for posting, that the median number is 6 as compared to 9.5 for total number of violations. Again, on page, let's see, this would be 11 for you, is that, again, for looking at a smaller subset of total number of violations, you can see, again, that the median is less for that performance measure, as well as the number of repeat violations. The median is 2 for those that voluntarily posted, and the median's 3 for those that did not. And then, 2, looking at the adjusted score, I did not do the rating score because we don't use that, but I looked at the adjusted score, and you can see the adjusted score range, and the median value for those who are posting is 88%, whereas those who are not posting are 74%. In addition to performance, another way of looking at this was how the number of people who are posting, not posting over time, and that's what chart number 14 shows. And you can see in the beginning there was more, and now it's dropped off and maybe steady. And then this would be 15, page 15, is the posting by county board districts, because I thought you'd be interested in that. The total sample is the total number of inspections that were done within that district. And the district that's leading in posting? District 4, 67% to 33%. In District 11, had 100% not posting. There was just two establishments that were inspected there. And then the last slide is acknowledgments to my environmental health specialists who actually do the work and help to verify some of the posting, non-posting. My administrative assistants who make these placards all the time, make sure we're stocked with the supplies that we need. And then I had 3 associates, Jonathan Green, who was an intern from ISU, who worked on temporary permit applications and inspections this year, as well as going back to the facilities that we had to make a determination whether they were posting or not. Stephanie was one of my mosquito abatement surveillance bikers, and she did the GIS work, and then Zhao Ling did the statistical work.
Thank you. James, question?
Yeah, I'm not going to speak to the actual placard system. I don't intend to take any sides on that, but I do have some questions. First of all, I appreciate you bringing data to us, and I appreciate you looking at the statistical significance, but I hesitate to find a survey or a study like this to be compelling, and I'll tell you why. First of all, I could identify you as a supporter of the placard system, right? Yes. That would be fair to say.
Yes.
And the method of scoring is carried out by your staff.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So
Based on what they see when they're doing an inspection.
Right, right. It's a measure. So the outcome that you would like to see would be that those showing placards have a better track record. That you'd like to see this bear out, correct?
I think that would be a fair statement, yeah.
So even if the numbers that you've put together are statistically valid, you can't look at this as a study that was created and done in what I would call an impartial way. So that's why I wouldn't find it compelling. The other thing that I'll point out, and this comes from a thing I think I heard a fellow board member say, is that their concern about a placard system would be about the relationship that it creates between the enforcement group and the proprietors. And so in a study like this, the folks who are antagonistic or not wanting to participate in this are going to have that more or that less comfortable relationship with the enforcement group. So I would expect to see that the folks that are not cooperating with a voluntary program tend to end up having lower scores than the ones who are positive about a voluntary program. So while I think this was good work and I think this was good number counting and validation of the sample size you have, yes, it is statistically valid. I don't find it as a study that I should see compelling a person who was on the fence to make one decision or another, because at its core, it has a built-in bias that was not corrected for from an enforcement standpoint, and it has a built-in bias that was not corrected for as a participant bias. So you'll excuse me if I challenge it as a persuasive outcome.
Stan?
That was very interesting, and I guess when I look at it, the Board of Health and Jim Roberts and some of his staff, this has been studied for many years, and we looked at several models, and even I've relayed this before, when I was a young man in California, there was a system in place like this. Basically, every restaurant is inspected, they get a score. All this place card does is they post it so people know that they've been given a good or a safe or a cease and desist type of order. We could go on about statistics. Statistics, to me, just like engineer studies, everyone's got an opinion. Everyone's got an opinion. We might say Rantoul police officers write 300 tickets while the sheriff, with more staff and more area, writes 20. Who's doing their job, or who's being fair? So when it comes to statistics, I never put much into that. I look at the people that are doing the job, and I tend to want to think, and yes, I agree there are employees that are not always fair, or they're looking for a favor, or they're looking for this. But as a whole, they're not. I mean, we hear about the bad apples, so that soaks into our head. We don't hear about all the good. And all we're trying to do here is give the consumer and the people that are using our restaurants a tool to look at instead of a report being hidden in some manager's desk. And Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been asked some of these questions. The first one is I asked last night at the Board of Health, do you receive very many complaints from any restaurant owners or staff through your office addressing some of these concerns?
No.
Next, the people that are volunteering to do this out in the rural areas, because this study was based on the rural areas, any strong arming going on that you're aware of?
No.
Have you heard of any?
No.
Okay. And lastly, this is no more cost to the county. It's a tool that needs to be there. My gosh, we regulate pest control. I mean, they got to have a license to spray, and anybody can step on a bug. We regulate hair cutting. I mean, it's just a host of issues. Believe you me, I'm a person, I don't want to see any more government regulation that is needed, and we're not causing any more regulation. All we're doing is we're posting something simple for us country folks to read, when we walk into a restaurant, instead of reading a 15-page report about items that may be of no concern to us. And the other thing I wanted to say is when your staff goes and does these inspections, are they looking at the paint? Are they looking at windows? What are they looking at? The kitchen, correct?
Correct.
They're not looking at carpet, ceiling tiles, or light fixtures unless someone's called in.
Correct.
Thank you.
Rachel?
Okay, first, just to remind ourselves, we're not talking about getting rid of health inspections, I mean, right? I think all of us think that what you're doing is extremely important. So just to make sure, we're not talking about not doing health inspections or not scoring. We're talking about should we or shouldn't we make mandatory, well, we're not even talking about that, but it's a preview of next meeting, I suppose, of should we make the placing of the placard mandatory. So my first question is, do you have on your website a place where you post these that everybody can go in and see?
No, not at this time, no.
Wouldn't that be a first step that would make a lot of sense, which would be
Well-
really cheap and people can go in and see all restaurants, whether they post or not?
The answer is yes, and
Okay.
7 years ago when we started, we haven't made there yet, but it's coming very soon.
Because that would sound to me like then it's not up to any individual owner to post or not, and I can go and look at not only what they currently have, but their whole history, which is probably more informative. The second one is, I, unlike other board members, don't really have any questions of your neutrality, so I'm assuming all these numbers are not biased. But my concern is the following. I don't think you can take a voluntary system and conclude from that that when you make it mandatory, things will go the same way. So if anybody, I don't know that that was the intent, but if anybody wanted to say, look, those who post get better scores, that doesn't mean that when we make posting mandatory, everybody's scores will go up. Obviously, there is a self-selection bias. Those who post wanted to post. So by making it mandatory, I don't necessarily expect these scores to go up. So if that was, I mean, I know some people were quoted in the paper to say, my God, this is astounding, what a difference, what posting makes. Well, posting didn't cause the difference, in my mind.
First off, I want to say I'm really excited to get one last chance to completely agree with Stan James before he leaves our vaunted group. You know, I spent time working in a couple of local restaurants, one of which was extremely proud of its regular, very good performance on these inspections. I also hope someday to be the old writer sitting in the corner of his own restaurant running the place. So I have a lot of respect for people trying to open businesses. I think that I would like for us to find more ways to make it easier for restaurants to open. I'd like to find room for pop-ups in our inspection code and things like that. But when I look at this, what it comes down to me is which side do I come down on? The protecting the right of a business owner to run his business as he sees fit, or protecting the rights of my constituents to know what's going on in the back kitchen? And I tend to come down on the second half of that. I think that anyone that's proud of their restaurant would want their clean results to be posted. And anyone who has a dirty restaurant, it ought to be known. And that's kind of where I come down, so I'll be in support of this.
I think keeping on topic, we're talking about the study, and I'll try to keep on topic. And I'll make a few points to back up my questioning. Mr. Roberts, and I want to kind of bounce off what Mr. Quisenberry said. It's not a very compelling report. I appreciate the time you put into it and staff. But it's not very compelling. When you do statistical information, I think there's has to be some constants involved. But I want to first start with the restaurant or the inspections themselves, Jim. And that is, you've got the board districts, but as we all know, Champaign and Urbana operate separate so there's no Champaign or Urbana restaurants in the study, is that correct? Within the city limits? Okay.
These are all in the county jurisdiction.
Okay, now these are all, so this would include Rantoul, Mahomet, St. Joseph.
Correct.
Is Savoy in this also?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other small communities. I want to get back to what I started out stating was constants. And I think for a study to be non-biased, and I'm not pointing the finger that you're going to be biased about it, but I think from the standpoint of if you're going to be, if you're going to present this as being an even playing field, I'll put it that way, a level playing field, how many inspectors were involved in this study? Are you going to count? Okay, so in other words, all your inspectors, I don't have to get a number, but all your inspectors?
Yeah, they're all my inspectors, and they all have jurisdictions across, they all have responsibilities of establishments across the county, as well as establishments within CU.
Okay. Okay. And I had a question you were describing too about the different categories. And I was wondering where one would fit in particular. I don't think it's listed, and maybe I missed it. I apologize if I did, but someplace like say, I'll use an example in Tolono, the Masons have a one breakfast per month as a fundraiser. Where would they fit in the category?
Probably Category 2.
Okay. Okay. I'm also concerned, and I brought up the inspectors, and I'm not picking on the inspectors. I want to make that clear. But I want to bring up an example in Tolono where, and maybe you can help me with a dollar amount if you remember, there was an inspection for a particular, and I'm not going to use any names, for a business that, a food establishment, retail establishment that had no inside seating, but basically sold out the door. And the inspector was there and didn't pick up what wasn't an issue, but didn't pick up one particular thing that was supposed to be in the inspection and caused several $100s to be spent, which didn't need to be spent, but then was re-inspected. And I think the taxpayers had to pick up that bill. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I remember the situation.
So that gets back to the inspection side of this. How accurate can the inspectors, because if you've got different inspectors looking, have a different eye of looking at different things is what I'm trying to get at this, what you're presenting to us. I think we can probably say that, maybe you agree with me or not, not all your staff sees the same thing that, I mean, not all your staff can recognize the same thing.
There are different types of inspections, and these are routine, unannounced inspections. The inspection you're referring to was a plan review construction inspection. And so during a plan review construction inspection, the focus is really on how it is constructed, equipment installed, and less about someone's not in there washing their hands. So a routine inspection is about looking at source, looking at food safety practices, and then sanitation. But
So it's just
it's
more.
a kind of different inspection, and those plan review inspections are not part of this.
Right,
These are
I
just routine
understand,
inspections.
but my point is we're all human, and we might see things different than other people is what I'm trying to make the point at.
Right, right. And we go through training where, we have joint people doing inspections. We go through an exercise called standardization, which is the FDA standardizes a state officer standardizes someone like myself, and then I go out and standardize staff. And we are not to be perfect with each other, but within a reasonable percentage of each other. And so we do that, and every week I have a staff meeting where any staff member can put something on the agenda that they ran into so we can discuss it to make sure that we are consistent. And so we work at consistency all the time.
Moving to something a little different here, concession stands. Do you remember how many concession stands that you inspect in the county?
Not offhand.
Okay.
10, 12 maybe? Probably, one in each town.
Okay. If, hypothetical, if the county deemed so to make a placard system, would the concession stands, and we're talking, what, small ballpark within the communities, Tolono has a concession stand, so does Sador's. There would have to be a placard at the door?
That's what we have done in the district, is that anyone that we issue an annual permit to, and the only other permit I have is a temporary permit, that everyone who has an annual permit, whether it's a grocery store, concession stand, school, daycare, in order to treat everyone the same, is that we required in the district everyone to have a placard.
Okay, I'm probably getting off topic here, I apologize. Is there a way I could see a list of all 3 categories of inspections, of the different retail operations that you have?
You want a list of all county establishments by category 1, 2, and 3?
Is there a list I could see?
I don't have one with me, but I can easily produce that and send it to you as an Excel spreadsheet.
Could you? Okay, I appreciate that. I guess that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Jeff?
Thank you for coming today. For so long, I've been looking for someone to come in with numbers and hard facts and whatnot, and actually coming in with a P-test or a series of P-tests, I commend you for doing that. So you got the nerd in me going here. The question I had with respect to how the test was conducted, just so I have a better understanding, what was the null hypothesis that you rejected with the P-test? Was it there was a relationship between posted versus not posted, or what was the relationship that you were rejecting in this case?
I took statistics 40 years ago, and I had to use a slide rule at the time. Okay, so I may not remember my statistics very much. That's why we had an intern do that. But I would think that there would be no difference in performance, for example, between posting and non-posting.
So that's okay. Was there any, I think this is really hitting on what John Schrader was mentioning, and I think even a few others, that the relationship between a county versus what I'll consider non-county, as in Champaign and Urbana, getting a level of P-test and saying, is there a difference between somebody who's voluntarily in a program, in a volunteer program versus a mandatory program? Because if that would indicate that there's a stronger indication of better performance, then I think that's a more compelling case than to say if you're in a volunteer program, whether you decided to do it or not tends to shift your score higher or lower. So have you done that comparison between that?
No, but this is an interesting idea because, the county had voluntary for the first 6 months. And then in the district, we also had mandatory, but without the effect of putting up a yellow placard. And now, since July 1st, we're doing the yellow placard. So we think we have 3 different environments in which to test these same parameters. And so the answer to your question is, I think after we do something for a year, we will test that and compare it between years.
I think that's the type of evidence I would need for any real discussion on whether or not a placard system would be good for a county or not, because I think that's the real telltale indicator of success, is the difference between a volunteer program versus not.
Thank you, Jeff. Ralph? Ralph, forget it. Okay. Jim, you had your hand up?
Sure, I was going to add some of the comments that were made, and I guess my older sister used to say I was grading my own papers when it comes to the statistics that James was talking about. And I find kind of the same thing when you look at, the issue of, voluntary or non-voluntary, and the fact that people that weren't accepting the placards were found to have more problems with the restaurants. I think if there was consistency, there should have been a lot, some of them, if there was consistency, that would be doing okay, if I would agree with what you're saying. And we shouldn't have seen so many of them, or a higher percentage of them, that were having problems if, there wasn't a bias toward looking for them to see a problem. And so, that leads me to believe there is a bias. And, we're bringing this information to us to make a decision about whether we should have a placard system in the county areas or smaller towns. And it is an issue about keeping restaurants open, where in the city, there's a lot of options. It's hard to keep and maintain a business in the smaller towns. And a placard like this means a whole lot more to them than it does here. And this is being brought to us based on the fact that, as I read in the paper, that we've reached 51% are voluntarily doing the placard system in this study. Well, when you look at this, many of them are a large portion of them are schools, and they are state mandated to do studies, so of course they would voluntarily do that, you know. But most of the restaurants that are in the study aren't voluntarily doing the placards. So it's not really that the county is asking for this placard system, or the restaurants in the county are asking for this placard system. It's that the schools and daycares and maybe the pressure of the studies that you're doing. And this does cost the study time, or the county time, to do these studies, and time for the health department to do these studies, and the system.
I don't know if it would help with the bias issue, but when the inspectors were there, they would issue the placard and ask if they would voluntarily post or not. Some said they would, some said they wouldn't. And the reason I had to have an intern is that many of them were going to wait and see or make a decision, talk to their boss, talk to the corporate office or whatever. And so we had to go back and verify whether they were posting or not. And that was simply just by driving by and seeing if they could see it or not. So it wasn't posting or not posting, make a decision right now based on this inspection, right at the inspection time. Sometimes we had to go back a month later and see if they were posting or not.
Ralph?
And then the other thing with the bias too, I just want to point out that first box and whisker plot, the range of total number of violations based on these inspections is almost exactly the same. For those who post, it was between 0 and 27, and those who were not posting was 0 and 26.
Ralph? Microphone, please.
Working with the Highway Committee and ELOC, I've done a lot of traveling out in the county, and I've eaten lunches in many of these places. And I can tell you this about that. I would like to see them inspected, and I'd like to see the results of those inspections on the door, because some of them were pretty bad. I also must confess that I never really got sick from any of it, but we're paying for this, and we should see the results of it.
Any other comments at this point? Patsy, and then James. Patsy is first.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for coming this evening. I still have my reservations that were expressed when this was brought to us originally, and I'm not going to take time to go through those. My next phase of questioning, though, is you're creating or trying to create a correlation, but there's no causation. And what I'm interested in for you to come back to us with is how you are going to look at the causation of what you are seeing as you go out in the country and look whether placards are posted or not. And the second aspect is I'm still very interested in the possibility of the various egregious things that you notice, you and your inspectors notice when you go into a restaurant, to revisit how the scoring numbers are, because I still argue that somebody could have something really egregious, but it wouldn't jump them out, or another restaurant could have a whole series of small items that would kick them out. And that has been very troubling to me from the perspective that people are going in and they see this on the door and they think, oh, we're great. But in fact, that is not the case by the scoring methodology, and whether we know that there is any causation connected with any correlation that you create here.
Yeah, I feel I need to explain myself a little bit. I'm not saying that anything bad happens in this process. When I talk about bias and when I talk about skewing of the study, I'm talking about the possibility of that. And when you're doing a study, your responsibility is to show why that did not influence the results. So if I came across as I'm saying, you guys are biased and you're always going to do it this way, I apologize, because that's not what I meant. What I meant was, and what I was trying to do was look at this wholly as a study and whether it's compelling or not, and comment on why I didn't think it was compelling. So if that's how I came across earlier, that's not what I intended to do. The possibility of bias and the possibility of the results being skewed by who participates and who doesn't, is something that a researcher has to say, here's how I eliminated that from the situation.
Right, I agree with you, but as long as I'm doing it, there's going to be bias, I guess. And, you know, because
That I can't help.
You know, I'm there. And my charge, though, was to summarize the information.
All right, and you did that, so thank you.
Stan?
No, we study a lot of things for a long time, and by the time we get to a decision, it's a mute issue in my mind. But I guess I'd say, just like the state does, let's put an advisory thing on the ballot and let the citizens say whether they want it or not. We don't have to abide by it, but we could put it on the ballot.
Any other comments? I'd like to make a comment, though I'm the chair, and I'm not going to come down on either side. You already know where I'm coming down on. But I dare say there isn't anyone who owned a restaurant franchise chain for 11 years sitting in this table except for me. I understand what restaurants are. I had 125 employees working for me, and I can tell you that whatever I can do to make it safer for my customers that walk in the door, that means the bottom line profitability gets better. It's a business, and a business shows that if you can show safety and security in a restaurant for your customers, then you're doing the right thing for them. And so I can only tell you that at 11 years in the business, that whatever I could do, and Jim can verify it, because I don't know if he can go back to get all my scores back in the 80s. I never went under 90 in my restaurants, only because I understood how important it was, because we've seen restaurants go under pretty quickly when a salmonella attack takes place. We've seen it in some of the restaurants right here in Champaign have to happen there. And I think anything we can do to make it safer for our customers is a better way to go. Jim?
Whether we have the placard system or not, the restaurants will still be inspected, correct? And they'll be closed if there's a problem with the restaurant.
That's correct.
Rachel?
Well, it sounds to me like you just made an argument for voluntary
Oh,
system,
did I?
because being such a great restaurant, you would display
Well-
your green placard and that's it.
Well,
So then those who
Okay,
don't have it,
fine.
we all understand they didn't display it.
All right, then I was misunderstood. So we'll go about this perhaps next month. Thank you, Jim. I really appreciate it. It took a little bit of time, but it's an important issue that we're talking about all our constituents in the county. So it's important that way. Thanks again, Jim. All right, let's move on. Sorry to keep the Champaign County Convention and Visitors Bureaus hanging on, but your turn, please.
Restaurants are very important in the tourism industry, so it
Oh,
was a
thank
very
you very
good
much.
discussion.
Which side do
so-
you fall on?
I am not
No,
on
you're not
either
going to get in the
side.
middle of this, I understand.
But I did eat some Blimpie subs back in the 80s, so
Stay neutral, stay neutral.
I'm always neutral. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you about the impact of tourism on this community. I'm Janie Luce, I'm President and CEO of Visit Champaign County, and I'd first like to start with the video that shows the highlights from this past fiscal year.
Is it working? Can we see it? Oh, look at that. Hello. You got popcorn? Uh-oh.
So let's face it, Champaign County offers amazing experiences for anyone taking that extra vacation day or coming for business, sports, or group tours. We draw visitors from around the state, the country, and the world. Whether it's the University of Illinois, Parkland College, the thriving arts and culture, exploring the outdoors, learning from our technology, or visiting our farmers, experiences happen here. I bet you're already thinking about how you might spend one more vacation day exploring Champaign County. A lot of you are well aware of what we do and our results through our quarterly reports and our ongoing communication. So tonight I want to focus for a few minutes on why these events and activities are so important to our community. There are 5 A's of tourism: attractions, accommodations, access, auxiliary services, and attitude. So how does Champaign County rate to the rest of the state, the country, and the world? When we're talking attractions, we live in a very rich community. Natural attractions including agriculture, forest preserves, and parks, and man-made attractions including museums, galleries, public art, and special events. To showcase those attractions, we created the first ever Hidden Treasures and Flavors of Champaign County, a bus tour for residents, including a special focus on international students and their families to highlight the diversity of our multicultural community. Events-wise, our community benefited from the Bloomington Gold Corvette Show in conjunction with the Blues, Brews, and Barbecue Festival, along with the Christie Clinic Illinois Marathon, IHSA State Wrestling Championships, and the Half Century of Progress Show with its largest attendance on record. 2, accommodations. Here we are talking lodging, restaurants, and shopping. This community has evaluated the need for more hotel rooms and opened the Hyatt Place and the Residence Inn in fiscal year 14. More hotels are expected to open over the next 1 to 3 years, all of which we work every day to fill those rooms year-round. Restaurants and retail are consistently opening and a few closing, which showcase the multicultural taste of this community, more and more with an emphasis on local flavors and unique gifts. The downtown Champaign area has become a destination in itself and a huge part of our community branding efforts. Access. Our community has a strong mass transit system and decent roads, despite this past winter. We've increased bike paths throughout the county. We've introduced zip cars, and we're working to increase Amtrak passenger service and improve the U of I Willard Airport. Our community hosted the Illinois Bicycle Summit in April, and we announced the Kickapoo Rail Trail project. Looking at access a little differently, Angela on our team hosted a site visit last week with 2 Brazilian group tour operators who weren't familiar with how our award-winning AgriTours Illinois program works. She explained to them that our farms, campus research departments, and private companies are not generally open to the public. So our role is providing access to engage our international visitors with our local agricultural community. Auxiliary services. This is the fun stuff, primarily marketing and sales that support our businesses to attract visitors. You saw in the video that we distributed this past year almost 70,000 copies of our showcase piece, The Visitor's Guide. You've got a copy of the brand new guide in front of you, which was produced in-house by Terry, our marketing director. It's been reformatted to tell our story even better. The video also referenced the huge increase in travel writer coverage, both online and print, as a result of Terry's efforts. We've introduced a new itinerary, Triple D Galore, along I-74, featuring diners, dives, and drive-ins from Danville to the Quad Cities, a collaborative effort that we're leading with 6 convention and visitors bureaus involved. Corey and Angela attended trade shows with sport planners, meeting planners, and group tour operators. All of those shows have resulted in follow-up site visits and booked groups to Champaign County. And I couldn't go tonight without a little bit of pride in the awards that Visit Champaign County received at the Illinois Governor's Conference on Tourism. Best Cooperative Partnership for Triple D Galore, and Best Rebranding Initiative for our AgriTours Illinois program. And a shout out to Prairie Fruits Farm, who received an Excellence in Agritourism Award last summer by Judy Bar Topinka at the Illinois State Fair. And finally, attitude. This includes our hospitality, our community awareness and support, advocacy on a local and state level, and building tourism ambassadors. This past year, we increased our number of tourism industry partners and funding levels. Founding, City of Champaign; Platinum, University of Illinois; Gold, Champaign County and Village of Savoy; Silver, Illinois American Water, Allerton Park and Retreat Center, which is a new one; Village of Rantoul, Busey, and the News Gazette; and Bronze, Robeson Family Benefit Fund, Carl, another new partner; U of I Employees Credit Union, McDonald's, Village of Mahomet, Village of St. Joe, and City of Urbana. We also introduced American Family Insurance as the new title sponsor of the 27th Mile Celebrate Victory Bash in conjunction with the Illinois Marathon. We hosted the first ever past board chairs roundtable going back to 1988 in our first chair of our board. We've strengthened our community teams, which includes the Champaign County Sports Council, the Sales Council, and a Tourism Council. So how do we rate ourselves on these 5 A's of tourism? In 2013, as shown in the video and also on the handout that you got with your guide, the Champaign County visitor industry resulted in 2,500 jobs, resulted in $5.07 million in local tax revenue that supports education, healthcare, public safety, and $306.6 million in direct spending by visitors on food, entertainment, transportation, and shopping. These numbers provided by the U.S. Travel Association show a 2.7% increase in direct spending over last year. The economy is stronger and our community is better because of tourism. So overall, it was a great fiscal year 14. Moving forward, our theme for this year is planting new seeds. We've created new initiatives, we've built relationships, and our efforts are paying off, but we want to keep growing. We are focusing on 5 new tourism growth markets. 1, ecotourism and sustainable tourism, including a focus on bundling our agricultural adventures with apples, wineries, goats, farmers markets, local flavors, farm tours, and more. 2, African American heritage tourism with an emphasis on family reunions and historical tours. 3, cultural tourism, specifically a public art sculpture tour connecting the entire region. And I say the region because Allerton Park is a partner of ours, and so we'll include Allerton with that as well. 4, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender tourism with a focus on LGBT-friendly destinations, suppliers, and events. And 5, international tourism, which were already heavily focused, but a targeted push toward the China market. There's much more that's included in our fiscal year 15 plans. We're focused on showcasing the power of our industry and its impact on not only our economy and businesses, but also on our health, education, and relationships. Tourism creates jobs and services, reduces taxes paid by local residents, enhances real estate value, and diversifies the economy. It generates community pride and improves our destination's image. I'll close with a huge shout out to the Visit Champaign County team, who work very hard and produce results. Angela Bradford, who's our International and Leisure Group Sales Director, Corey Hatfield, our Sales and Sports Director, Angie Poe, Office Manager, and Terry Reefsteck, Marketing and Business Development Director. Also to Clark Sorensen and Lisa Stover, who work part-time in our Welcome Center. Also a big thank you to Max Mitchell, who does a great job representing all of you on our Board of Directors. But most important, thank you to the Champaign County Board for your gold partnership and your ongoing support. On behalf of Champaign County, I have a token of appreciation for your FY14 partnership, and we look forward to many great things to come. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Very nice. Gold partner. Thank you. All right, let's move on to standing committees. Facilities, please, Stan.
Oh, wait.
Oh, I'm sorry, Max. Yeah. Microphone, please.
just wanted to wrap this up a little bit, that appreciate Jane's attendance here this evening. And I think that, we're going to be studying the budget here real soon. I think that the Champaign County Convention and Visitors Bureau gives an excellent value for our investment. So I think that's a key point. Then talking about the A's and the outstanding attitude that that office represents. So they really, I really want to commend them. And worked on a strat plan for the upcoming year, and they really have a very, very aggressive agenda. So, I really want to commend Jane and her tireless staff, because, a lot of us just work 40 hours, and I think after 40 hours, they're going into their second phase of the week. So they really, really put forth a lot of energy and effort to, to bring events and to make Champaign County shine to people from outside the area. So thanks.
Thank you, Max. Patsy?
Hi, thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing your publication, your brand-new publication. In past times, I have encouraged the Visitors Bureau to highlight and put a shine on those restaurants and breweries in our community that are using a lot of local foods and our local breweries. And in the section here on food, I don't see any of that next to all of the different restaurants that are doing it. You highlight Prairie Fruits Farm and Big Grove, which do, but the write-up on Black Dog, they use local foods. So talk about economic development, that is really economic development. So I encourage the next time you do a publication that there is a column where you highlight those that are using a lot of local foods and our local breweries. I don't find the breweries in here either.
They're all included in there. I have to look and see what page, but they're
Okay.
definitely, there's a whole shout out on the breweries with
Okay,
that, so the
good.
4
Thank-
locally crafted ones, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Jane. Appreciate it. Let's move on. Stan, County Facilities.
Basically, the summary of action is in your packet. If anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in. If not, the next is a bit of business, and it's adoption of resolution number 8983, authorizing contract with Engineering Resource Associates Incorporated. Excuse me.
Thought we were going to,
Is that a motion?
Stan?
I'm not going to make the motion, but someone else can.
I'll make the motion.
By John. Considering the fact, Stan, that we have diverging agreements by 2 engineering firms, I'd like to set aside that motion and ask that, because there's obviously this last engineering firm just dropped on our desk today, that we move this back to facilities for complete discussion on agreements on whether we really need to move forward or not to move forward in the satellite jail issue. So I'll go with discussion now on James.
I think the appropriate way to accomplish this is to move to defer to the next Facilities Committee meeting, and I would do so.
Okay, James would move, Jeff was second. Is that all right with you, Stan? That's fine. Okay, and the second was John, is that okay with you? Josh, was Josh okay with Josh? All right, so the motion is to defer this issue back to the Facilities Committee next month. All right, go ahead, Jeff, you want to discuss it?
Sure. So in the committee meeting, this was brought forth without recommendation for this exact purpose, so that you all have a chance to look at this and really take it in case we do need to bring this up next month. We did not want this to fall on your plate and say, this is the first time I've ever seen it. So we want you all to look at it and really ingest it in case we do have to bring it up next month.
Thank you, Jeff. It's Chris and then Jim.
Just wanted to confirm with Sheriff Walsh, since he's here. I understand, Sheriff, you were involved in helping us get this second opinion. Are you comfortable with this going back to facilities?
I am. I am.
That's all I needed to hear. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Jim?
So how did we arrive with 3 different studies of the same building?
That's what we want to go back to facilities and discuss, if that's okay.
So what is the process for determining how we get studies?
Well, the Facilities Committee will decide if we want to bring it back either with recommendation or without, and then we'll discuss it as the next month. But the reason for that, Jim, is because we now have two diverging.
Well, I'm asking a question, so I would like, so we can have a process for that before we.
Well, the process would be, it'd be in facilities.
Because I think there's a question about how engineering studies are requested.
Okay, I
So
think you can discuss
just
that
so
in
that can be
facilities as well.
Brought back to the Facilities Committee.
Thanks, Jim.
Mr. Chair, could I answer part of that?
Yes, Dan, go ahead, please.
I'm the one who asked for this study. I heard what John had to say. I talked to John at length about this. I had employees in there. I have inmates in there. I was concerned that by the time we get through all these borings and core samples with the house of cards, as he said, that something bad could happen. So I located this engineer. I asked Dana to get him all the stuff he did, and the money for it is coming out of my budget.
Thank you, Dan. All right, all in favor to defer back to facilities for next month, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Let's move on. That's it on facilities. ELOC? Microphone, please. Thank you.
Since you ask. I move approval of Resolution 8936, approving the proposed fiscal year 2015 county planning contract work plan.
Second.
Second by Aaron. Discussion. Patsy?
Yes, just to give folks the point of reference, I'm going to be talking about page 21, and within that matrix, item 1512, which relates to section 8.3.1 of the LRMP. And I listened to the gentleman from Prairie Rivers Network give his comments, and we all realize much is being discussed concerning water in our county from very many different perspectives. And based on all those things that are happening around the issue of water, I think it's important that not only a focus be made to surface water, but also subsurface water, which would play into the last sentence within that matrix.
Thank you. Ralph? All right,
Susan?
any other discussion? Chris?
Yeah, my reading of that, and we had some discussion of this in caucus, I think my reading of that is that including other natural resources, it's hard to imagine that groundwater is not considered a natural resource. So I would hope that there would be some clarification of that in the zoning ordinance that is brought to us. But my feeling is that that had to be certainly the intent of the original goal of the LRMP. Clearly, we're concerned about groundwater, and I'd be astounded to hear that that wasn't the intent of that paragraph.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
That's it.
That's it. Thank you, Ralph. Let's move on. Highway, Lorraine.
Okay, the Highway Committee has one item on here, and it's going to be up under the Finance Committee.
Okay.
So I have nothing to offer.
All right, thank you, Lorraine. Let's move on to policy, personnel, and appointments. James.
No, I don't think I've done this before. Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move adoption of ordinance number 946, an ordinance establishing travel regulations policy for Champaign County, Illinois, and rescinding ordinance 780, and I so move.
So moved. Second, Jeff. Thank you. Any discussion? Patsy.
Yes, let me find the page first here. I'm looking at page 38 in your packet, and it's actually the top of the page. It's number B for Article 7. And Ms. Busey and I had a bit of email exchange this afternoon for a clarification between what Article 7A is instructing and what Article 7B is instructing. And she explained to me Article B, if I have this correct, she's here to correct me, pertains to people who have reimbursements from a window shorter than 60 days to the end of the fiscal year. Do I understand correctly? Okay. I would encourage maybe a little bit of clarification in that first sentence so that that is clear to the next people who read.
And based on your input, I do have a recommendation for an amendment if the board would be willing to consider it. It is the second full sentence that starts with the third line under B. All requests for reimbursement of travel expenses incurred in the month of December of each year instead of up to December 31st. Would clarify that. It is, Ms. Petrie is right, it was not clear the way it was written. So if that's acceptable, I would like to ask that you approve that change.
Do we need a motion for that? I'll second that. Second amendment, or amendment by Patsy, seconded by Chris. All right, any other discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Main motion is the approval of the entire change. Any discussion on that again? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Let's move on to finance. Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move adoption of resolution number 8941, payment of claims authorization.
Second.
Second by James. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. I move adoption of resolution number 8942, purchases not following the purchasing policy.
Second by Aaron. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Number 3.
Thank you. I move adoption of resolution number 8943, authorizing budget amendment 14-30, increased appropriations of $1.4 million from the county motor fuel tax budget, $400,000 for the City of Urbana-Fowler Road project, $250,000 for salt purchases for the coming winter, $750,000 for the County Highway 20 and County Highway 11 projects. And I would note that our very patient county engineer is here, and I would hope that
Yes,
people would ask him the questions that
Jeff,
you
come
wanted to
on
know
to
at
the
the count.
table. I want to get the motion, though, first. Chris, second by Lorraine on that issue. And just to let you know, this is a roll call, 15 vote for passage. There had been some questions concerning some of the numbers here. Do you have any questions for Jeff? Stan?
Philo Road project, correct me, because I brought this up in the meeting. Wasn't there some type of ruling on that when you came to us one time and you said that due to federal funds out, there was an intermix or something like that, and that bill was no longer going to be there? And then later I heard that someone else ruled on it and said it was coming back to us. Am I thinking of another road or that one?
Well, in general, yeah, this particular project does fall into that conversation that we've had since I first got here back in 2004. There was a memorandum from IDOT back in 2000 that said that counties cannot use motor fuel tax funds unless the existing street in a municipality is designated a municipal extension of a county highway. And then there was an opinion written by Steve Ziegler from the state's attorney's office clarifying the actual things that motor fuel tax funds may be used for and the certain limitations. And there was no listing of any use of motor fuel tax that could be used on public roadways within a municipality. So that led to how are we going to, make our commitment that we had committed back in 1996 to the Philo Road project because highway funds were off limits and motor fuel tax funds were off limits. And then in October of 2013, so more recently, obviously, a procedure memorandum from the Illinois Department of Transportation came out, and it says, and I quote, "Joint improvements, motor fuel tax funds may be used by a local public agency to perform construction or maintenance on public highways not under its jurisdiction, provided there is a written contract approved by the department or a negotiated agreement." So let's see, back in June, the county board passed the intergovernmental agreement between the city of Urbana and the county funding the reconstruction of Philo Road, obligating $392,403 from the county motor fuel tax funds, and the city of Urbana on July 24th approved it as well. So I'm here asking for those funds that were in the Philo Road agreement as part of this budget amendment.
So my follow-up would be, if it's 392 and some odd change, why are we asking for 400,000?
Well, in the general overall budget amendment, I didn't want to go into changes in numbers and pennies. I put a round number in for the total budget amendment. This isn't 400,000 that exactly is going towards the Philo Road. I'm asking for a budget amendment which consists of a total of $1.4 million, of which 400,000 of it was to be used for that Philo Road.
And one more follow-up, if I may. When was the road work done? When was that completed?
Last summer.
Last summer?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Just wanted to confirm, it's 400,000 in the budget amendment, but the check we write to the city is for the previous, the agreed
That's
upon
correct.
amount, right, the 392?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Aaron?
Yes, Jeff. When we talked about that committee of whole, not saying that my memory's any better, but Ms. Busey just mentioned something that she was thinking maybe, and I don't remember this, but I was just wanting to clarify this. Maybe when we had something, we couldn't use the money for it, was the original ruling. It kind of went off our desk for a while. She mentioned something that it just stuck in my head, that maybe we had, I know, like maybe the engineering hours or something for, I believe it was Lincoln, we kind of traded put some like engineering hours into that in place of this. I just wondered if that was the case or not.
We have an agreement, $1.1 million on the Lincoln Avenue project. City of Urbana, $1.1 million, Champaign County, $1.1 million for engineering, design, and construction of that project. And the thought process was, yes, you're remembering right, that if we couldn't do this through this means directly towards the Philo Road project, that possibly we could have skewed the numbers and done an amendment to the Lincoln Avenue project agreement to put this money in there, but that was never done.
Okay, those numbers haven't been skewed yet. Okay, that
Yes.
clarifies it. Thank you.
Patsy?
Another clarification.
Sure.
When the original road agreement was done, Urbana had certain boundary lines.
Yes.
And then when it came up to this redesign of that road, the Urbana boundary lines had moved south slightly. I don't remember the exact distance.
Right.
But my bottom line question, which again sort of came up during the COW meeting, is what extra amount, because I believe the agreement was that we would pay up to the new boundary line. Do you have any idea what that cost us in extra funding to do that?
I would be just doing an extrapolation of numbers. I mean, we're probably talking about an extra $30,000, $40,000 if I was going to put a number on it. I haven't looked at their numbers to see. I do know that we agreed in principle to help them rebuild Philo Road, and the method and means in which they went about rebuilding it, by doing just an asphalt section with kind of a more of a ditch section than curb and gutter. They didn't put a Cadillac road out there and ask for us to pay for it. They could have gone all concrete and curb and gutter and, under drains and sewer systems, and it would have cost a heck of a lot more than what they're asking for. So I think they did their best to make this project, fit the means that they wanted it to, which is to upgrade the roadway and get the transportation through there, but not try to overspend and build a Cadillac system.
All right, any other discussion on this motion? Okay, all in favor? What? I'm sorry. Roll call, of course. Didn't I say that up front? No. I did. Roll call, 15 votes.
James?
No.
Jay?
Yes.
Kibler?
Yes.
Langenheim? McGuire?
Yes.
Michaels?
Yes.
Mitchell?
Yes.
Petrie?
Yes.
Quisenberry?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Rosales. Schrader. Schwartz. Alex. Cowart. Esri.
Yes.
Hartke. Kurtz.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you. Number 4, I guess, is moot at this time.
Yes, I would concur, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and any new business? I don't have any. A motion, what, Max?
Real quick,
Microphone, please.
when we were correspondents, I failed to recognize Deb Busey. She tirelessly.
Jeff, don't leave yet.
She tirelessly spent her morning, Saturday morning, addressing the UCCI Leadership Academy. Her topic, she discussed the nuts and bolts of county finance and balancing county budgets. So I want
That's
to thank
exciting.
you
That's
for
an
your
exciting
attendance.
one. I really want to jump on that one. Before we close, Jeff wasn't here last week at the Cow when I announced he was the Engineer of the Year in the state of Illinois, and we want to recognize him while he's here. Hey, Jeff. And now, a motion to adjourn. So move. Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.